I am showing up with so much gratitude today. It is not just because of the frozen tundra that I left behind in Connecticut, but really it's gratitude for each one of you for prioritizing your time to delve more deeply into how you can lead your Catholic faith-based organizations to full financial health and vitality. Thank you for connecting faith and philanthropy so intentionally, so prayerfully, so scholarly, and for just being here, committing to being in person and present to one another. Peter has invited me to speak about themes that are so near and dear to my heart. But for the past 2.5 years that I have been at the helm of Catholic Charities USA, I am rarely invited explicitly to talk about these themes. So I'm very, very grateful to be with you and to speak from the heart about the spirituality of fundraising. Peter, I also have to comment on how exceptionally well organized the conference is, how thoughtful you were about your speakers. A number of them are friends of mine, Corey, Andrew, Scott, Peter, yourself, Jamie Cappello, who I didn't get to see, but also just the way you've organized it. And my only hope is that in your wisdom at placing me right after the phenomenal Eva, you weren't intending this to be a case study in what not to do. My hands are up and I am smiling and I'm very present to all of you. Present also is my beloved colleague, Andrea from Catholic Charities USA, and at least 5 staff members from Catholic Charities Arizona. I get to spend tomorrow touring around the great work that Catholic Charities does throughout this incredible state. So I just want to begin with a brief bit about my background. Then I'm going to talk about obstacles to successful fundraising and spend most of the time on maxims of successful fundraising in the context of our faith, and hope to leave enough time for a discussion because I'm really eager to hear from you all as well. So my background is in Catholic philanthropy. I was born to a family with an 80-year history of serving the Catholic Church at the local, diocesan, national, and international level through the instrument of a private family foundation. This foundation was established 80 years ago by John and Helena Raskob, our great-grandparents. They had 2 intentions. They wanted all of their resources to be used exclusively to support the Catholic Church. Any ministry, any apostolate, any activity near and dear to the Catholic Church's heart anywhere in the world. This hardly limited our scope. Virtually anything that is happening in the world is something that the Catholic Church cares deeply about. Their second intention was that their children and descendants would be stewards of the foundation's resources. And to this day, there are close to 100 direct descendants of John and Helena who are actively engaged as volunteers in a non-remunerative way in the work of the foundation. We span 5 generations now. And the secret sauce is we are invited to serve as volunteers in the work of this Catholic foundation, beginning when we are teenagers. And almost everyone says yes. And it has had a profound impact on the degree to which each of us is Catholic and grows up with an adult, mature life committed to Catholicism. So a profound effect of evangelization on our family. The Church's explicit religious mission has formed the person I am, but the fact that the Church is the largest global humanitarian network in the entire world renders me forever committed to its health and vitality. I was introduced to this curious word stewardship from a very young age as a consequence of being brought up in this family, the Raskob family. And one definition of stewardship is the proper care of all that has been entrusted to one. But I believe with all of my heart that for the Christian, proper stewardship is also the recognition of and proper care of the potential at hand. Think about how often we might think in our ministries, this would be a really wonderful thing for the church, for people, for young adults. And then we think, but I'm just so busy with all of my responsibilities. I believe proper stewardship is really recognizing, calling us to recognize the potential for good in our midst that we can help steward and bring to full potential. My earliest heroes and heroines as a consequence of this work through Raskob were women and men, ordained religious and lay, all over the globe, bearing witness to human suffering and refusing to walk away or walk past. These women and men were compelled by their Catholic faith to alleviate that human suffering, to provide education, to sow the seeds of peace, to advance healthcare, to heal, to advocate, to be present to extend the sacramental life to people. And I remember thinking that these heroes of mine are bearing witness to the worst of what humankind can do to one another and to our common home. And yet, in their work and in their vocation, by living out their vocation, they seemed to be the happiest people, the most obviously joyful, with the most interior freedom that I had ever encountered. And I couldn't figure out how that could be, but I knew growing up that I wanted to be like them. I also knew that I was unlikely to be as selfless as they are. So I used to pray as a child that God would let me do something behind the scenes so that I could make a positive contribution to my moral heroes in their vocation. I truly believe after all of these years, being invited to serve at Catholic Charities USA is a direct answer to that prayer. I thought I would make my entire life in the field of Catholic philanthropy, but 30 years ago, I was called by the Catholic chaplain at Yale University, Father Bob Boulogne, a diocesan priest from the Archdiocese of Hartford, who had begrudgingly left parish ministry, which he loved, to be appointed Catholic chaplain at Yale. He thought it was going to be just listening to boyfriend-girlfriend problems all day long, 7 days a week. But when he finally got there, he realized that this was truly living out his vocation. And the first thing he noticed was that although 25% of the student body identified as Catholic, hardly anybody was coming to Mass. And they certainly weren't coming back on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the rest of the week. And he observed that while they had this rich tradition of serving the Catholic community at Yale, financially they were really suffering. They had a small endowment that the board was borrowing from to pay for operating costs. Their response to fiscal crisis was to eliminate staff and eliminate programs to pare back. And yet they kept ending at a growing deficit. It was a beautiful chapel that was in need of a lot of renovation and upgrades. Deferred maintenance had been what the board had elected to do in this stance of fiscal distress. And this is when he comes onto the scene and calls me and says, "Kerry, I have been really putting this to prayer, and we need to be serious about raising money at Yale, at St. Thomas More at Yale." I finally, after 3 years, persuaded our predominantly lay board of very smart Yaleys the wisdom in moving forward with a capital campaign. And I'm here to tell you that this capital campaign is going to be 5 years, $5 million, entail very little travel or anxiety or stress. I am looking for a part-time leader of this development effort, and your name came to me in prayer. Now, I loathed the idea of being responsible for raising money. This is my confession to all of you who are doing this professionally and vocationally. I was terrified at the thought. I knew nothing about it, had never been trained in it, could not believe this man was calling me, asking me to lead his development effort when I had no background. And I was nervous on the phone because I didn't want to let such a good person down, and was struggling to think of how do I say no here? And then I remembered that I was 7 months pregnant with my second child. And so I said to him, Father Bob, thank you so much for thinking of me. I'm such an unlikely candidate truly for this. I am 7 months pregnant with my second child. There was this long silence on the phone. And then this joyful congratulations. And he said, Kerry, I'm so happy for you and your husband. This is phenomenal news. You can work from home. He said to me, look, I know I'm springing this on you, but all I ask is that you pray about it for 5 days. After 5 days, call me with your answer. Whatever your answer is, after praying about it, of course I'm going to honor and respect. So I hung up the phone really happy. I knew that 5 days of praying and my no would be especially eloquent and convincing. And to no one's surprise who takes prayer seriously, when you take prayer seriously, you are often the one changed. And I, to this day, do not understand how it is in prayer that I found myself willing to take this huge leap of faith and say yes to being his primary partner in raising money and expanding Catholic life at Yale. We learned a lot of what I'm here to share with you the hard way, which is just by sheer determination and a commitment to a shared vision of helping bring to fruition a Catholic intellectual and spiritual center of consequence for brilliant, brilliant young adult Catholics, but not just to give Yale one more thing to be proud of. Our work was designed to help raise the bar of Catholic campus ministry all over the country, all over the world. So a few comments about obstacles to development, and we had many of them. Just take 30 seconds to reflect in your own lives what obstacles are impeding your own ability to secure full financial health for your ministries and for your Catholic organizations. For us, the first one was fear. Fear just played such a dominant role. Fear about asking too little, fear about asking too much, fear about where to start, fear about being so inadequately prepared and trained, fear about making a mistake. Fear was a constant theme, and yet when we juxtapose the gospel to that, all we heard was, be not afraid, be not afraid, be not afraid. So there was something in conflict there. Another obstacle was for Father Bob. Father Bob did not discern a vocation to the priesthood to bring up the uncomfortable subject of your money and parting with it, So he felt like he was asking people for a personal favor, when in fact he was really just inviting them to invest in Catholic campus ministry, but he had to wrestle with this idea that he was asking for a personal favor. The language around fundraising, I was so astonished when I started paying attention to this, and we're all guilty of it. Hit her up for money, put the squeeze on him, target them. It was again and again and again the language of violence and violation, and I did not recognize myself in that. And so no wonder if we're just so glibly talking about fundraising in these terms, we may bring a cognitive dissonance to it. Inadequate training in finance and fundraising, that was true for both of us. Unrealistic expectations and misunderstandings about development on the part of one's prime colleagues and collaborators. Everybody has an opinion about it. Some board members think it's just, you've got a magic wand, and if you work hard enough with this magic wand, it will all happen. And then the most difficult, I think, to overcome was a mentality of scarcity and competition and trying to protect our donors. All of these things, when we put them to prayer and talked about them and tried to live out our faith in this work, had to be examined fully. And I will be looking forward to telling you how we address these. So just a snapshot of before and after, because you all have your own fundraising stories to tell, and you know where you started and where you can end up. For us, we were coming to Yale's Catholic Center in a period of decline, measured by student participation, programming finances, deferred maintenance on the existing chapel, the residence, the office space, and kind of poor morale. It took Father Bob 3 years to persuade this predominantly lay board to allow him to start the campaign. They finally were worn down and said, okay, you can have your campaign. How much money do you purport to raise in this? And Father Bob, without really doing any kind of feasibility study, I mean, we didn't even know that word existed or how to spell it, said $5 million. And the board collectively gasped, $5 million. We thought you would say 1 million, and we don't believe that that is possible. So we didn't even have our board really behind us. This was tough, to embark in that regard. One trustee took Father Bob aside and said, my suggestion, Father, is shutter the building, close up Catholic campus ministry at Yale, go out on the road for 2 years, raise money, then come back and open it up. And he said, with all due respect, I didn't leave parish ministry, which I love, to preside over the temporary closing of Catholic campus ministry. We have to live out our mission now. We are not closing this up. Yale had a quota system in place that intentionally, and they're upfront about this, kept the number of Catholics and Jews to a minimum. So even the population that we had at our disposal of Catholic alumni who were capable of making a significant gift was a smaller piece of that pie. But Father Riggs, who founded the Catholic chaplaincy at Yale, knew in a prescient way that one day the campus would be filled with many more Catholics, and he wanted to build for that future. I think perhaps the most crushing part of my realization when I said yes to this was that the board had permanently deleted 80% of their mailing list. So it wasn't just like tag, do not mail. It was they permanently deleted 80% of the mailing list on the grounds that those 80% had not contributed to the annual appeal, and they wanted to save money on the postage. So we had to do damage control right from the beginning to try to persuade Catholic alumni across the country. We still exist, we're still here, it's a new day, and here is our vision. Honestly, I have trouble breathing when I think back to those days. And it is so nice to be on this end of it, because here's what happened. Fast forward, it took us 9 years, but we never expanded our staff. It was still just Father Bob and me. I was part-time as the development director, and I did get to work from home. That part was true, but nothing else that he prophesied was true. So after 9 years, we raised $75 million. That is 15 times the original goal. What's more, the board itself was responsible for 5 million of that 75. In other words, the entire original goal, they assured us, was impossible. We introduced 14 new initiatives, added a third Sunday liturgy, standing room only, to accommodate the growing number of students and faculty coming to Mass. Remember, no one's mom or dad is making these young adults go to Mass at Yale. We paid off the debt on the books. We introduced best board governance practices, which included term limits. We expanded the pastoral team and staff to 21 people. We built a 30,000 square foot Caesar Pelli designed Catholic Student Center on property Yale leased us for 99 years for one payment of $20. I could have finished the campaign if I had collected the $20 from everybody who said, I'll give you that $20, Kerry. $20 for a 99-year lease from Yale is itself a miracle in this story. We created a national young adult leadership formation program to share with campuses across the country. And in the middle of our campaign, when the devastating sexual abuse crisis happened, we hosted a 3-day conference called Governance, Accountability, and the Future of the Catholic Church. We published the proceedings. 600 people attended that. The material was wrenching, and yet everyone left hopeful, convicted that we are not abandoning our faith family. We are not abandoning the church. We are staying and calling it to greater levels of holiness, accountability, transparency. We built the building, this beautiful student center, debt-free, and at last glance, the endowment had risen to $90 million. And I honestly knew nothing about fundraising, and neither did Father Bob. But we learned along the way. Attending convenings like this became tremendously helpful to us. But what was most important was that from day one, we were just committed to living out our faith every day, applying our faith every day to this work. We did not want it to be anything other than fully consonant with the values that we espoused and shared, that were grounded in Catholic teaching. So now I want to tell you some stories about how essentially what we discovered is that we broke a lot of fundraising rules, but it was never out of arrogance. It was entirely out of ignorance. And we would learn then from those mistakes. But what we were never going to compromise on was doing this seemingly impossible task in any other way than as a reflection of the best of what it means to be Catholic. And as I started to think about all of this, like, how is it that we are succeeding in this work against all of these obstacles and odds? I started to realize that the very attributes that everyone in this room commits to, the spiritual practices that you commit to in order to be a better Catholic, a better person, a more loving and merciful, Christ-like person, all of the things that you do or aspire to do so that you can cultivate an adult, mature life of faith within you, those were the very things that, when applied to the activity of fundraising, helped us succeed. So what do I mean by that? I'm going to tell you a few stories. The first is, and these are kind of in the form of maxims. The first is gratitude. Everything begins and ends in gratitude. I'm sure you have had speakers talk about the importance of being grateful to your donors. This is even more fundamental than that. It's a sense of everything we have has been given by God, and we are grateful for that. I remember meeting Henry Nouwen shortly before he died, and he was talking about the fundamental truth in our lives is that God loves you so much just for being you. And we know that intellectually, we hear that God loves us, but we spend all of our adult lives talking ourselves out of that or arguing against that or qualifying it. And he says, but every now and then you have this profound awareness that you are so exquisitely loved by God just for being you. And when you experience that, you are profoundly grateful. You want to love God back. So how do you love God back? Well, Henry would say, by loving all that God loves, each other, creation, by being fruitful as a response to loving God. And I see that as so fundamental when it comes to the leadership roles that you all have in advancing such vitally important Catholic faith-based ministries. Second, be worthy of generosity. Every single thing that is part of our ministries matters. It matters how the receptionist greets people. That title should be Director of First Impressions. It matters. You can't cut corners, even thinking that you'll save a few dollars if you can do things a little subpar. All of it matters because the whole point here is being worthy of profound generosity. It's why being transparent and accountable with our finances, with our HR practices, everything that I learned in the wake of the abuse crisis and helping bring Leadership Roundtable as a resource to bishops and pastors and Catholic executive directors bore this insight. It's to be trustworthy. Third, money follows mission. When we started at St. Thomas More, there was debt on the books. There was a very small operating budget. The board had really shrunk way down, and they certainly didn't have money for new initiatives. But we couldn't afford any time. We had to be faithful right then and there, not in a year when we had raised more money. So we were desperately living out of mission in the real time, regardless of the financial situation. And in speaking to Yale Catholic alumni, everybody has something to give. I mean, we are all called to be generous. We're all called to be generous. And we make a mistake when we think of generosity only in terms of dollars. In this case, a donor gave us an idea, like a brilliant idea that we had never considered before. And it was to essentially do an audit of everything at our disposal at Yale. And when we did that audit, sure, it confirmed how bad our finances were at that moment, but it also revealed an underutilized resource, perhaps the greatest treasure at our disposal that we had overlooked, and that was Yale Catholic faculty. So we identified across the entire university 88 Catholic faculty from every discipline and graduate program. And we introduced ourselves to each of them and persuaded them to be part of something we were calling Life as a Scholar and a Believer. And every month after the Sunday 5 p.m. liturgy, we invited these brilliant Yale Catholic professors to speak not so much about their scholarship, but their personal life of faith. They had the students spellbound because the students knew them as intellectual giants who would be invited all over the world to speak about their intellectual, scholarly contributions. But they had never heard them speak so intimately and personally about their personal life of faith. Every story was different. And the students were deeply inspired by this. Well, that cost us nothing. We didn't have to cover the transportation, put somebody up for a night. It costs us the price of a spaghetti dinner. And yet, when we went on the road to tell alumni about these conversations between these intellectual giants and Catholic students, alumni loved the idea, and they started to contribute to us for our next big idea. Money follows mission. Fourth, donors are subjects, not objects. Priests and pastors can bring their full pastoral skill to bear on the activity of fundraising. I was incredibly blessed to know and work with Father Bob Beloin. He was the quintessential priest, chaplain, pastor. He was joyful, smart, engaging. He did not even realize how much skill and ability he had. But every person from any background who came to him for pastoral counseling, it was as though they were looking into a mirror, seeing the very best, what is most beautiful and true about them. He was really extraordinary. He died of glioblastoma about 8 years ago. But while he was Catholic chaplain, he just was mesmerizing and captivating and deeply faithful, a phenomenal homilist, joyful, easygoing. And when I would take him on the road to meet wealthy Catholic alumni, all of a sudden he became tongue-tied, fidgety, wouldn't look people in the eye, as Eva was reminding us to do. And I thought, what is happening here? Like, who is this man? And so we had to really speak about what this was. Like, why so shy and retiring? And when we discussed it and put it to prayer, we realized that we were unconsciously seeing donors as objects to try to get as much money out of as quickly and painlessly as possible. When the truth of the matter is that donors are subjects like all of us with their own hopes, dreams, regrets, aspirations, desires. And when he could make that, when he could really internalize that, then he saw every encounter with a prospective donor the way he saw every encounter with a student or faculty member. It was an occasion for grace. It was a sacred conversation, and he was able to bring his full complement of attentiveness and joyfulness to the occasion. Development is ministry. This is my favorite story in the 9 years. And it concerns the largest donor to our campaign. It was a man named Tom Golden, who had never married, no brothers and sisters, no nieces and nephews, had worked his entire life, and had amassed quite a small fortune, but very unassuming, honestly, fairly reclusive. And he had been drawn to an event that we created when we were trying to tell the world, we're sorry about permanently deleting 80% of you from our database, and therefore you haven't heard anything about us, but we are alive and well, and we're having a big party, and you're all welcome to it. It's our 60th anniversary. And we had identified 12 prominent Catholic speakers, and it was billed as a celebration of Catholic intellectual life. And Tom saw an ad in a local paper because, of course, he had been deleted. And he was drawn to two of the speakers. So he kind of got up his courage and drove the hour to our campus and was there. The chapel was full. It was a really vibrant day. And because we had an audience and because I didn't know any of the rules about feasibility studies or silent phase, like silent phase, had never heard that term before. I had a microphone, I had an audience. I blurted out that we plan to raise $5 million and here's our vision for Catholic life at Yale. And Tom Golden came up to us at the end of it, and he was in kind of worn clothes, very modest and very quiet, said, "I liked what you said. I'd like to get involved here and help out with the campaign." And I thought, oh, we'll have somebody to help us stuff the envelopes. So I was very happy and grateful and said, we will make sure to involve you. It took us a few years before Father Bob and I, even visiting him, going to lunch with him, before we realized that he was a man of such profound wealth. It was part of our commitment to live our faith in consonance with how we were going to run the campaign. There was never going to be in our world a separation of who is worthy of time and attention. We really believe that everyone had something to contribute to this vision. And we wanted everybody to be at the party, at the finish line, properly confident that they had contributed something. So Tom was the game changer, as it turned out. We befriended him. He heard us talk about the campaign and the vision and our progress. And he said, here is what I have decided to do. I will leave you $25 million in my will, or 75% of my estate, whichever is greater at the time of my death. And then he paused and he said, "Pray I live a long, long life," because that number keeps increasing. And he said, "I am confident you are going to raise all the money you need for this new student center from other alumni and other donors. If you do it and you put a shovel in the ground and I get to see it in my lifetime, then I will leave you this bequest. And thus the long-term financial health of the ministry will be forever secured." Extraordinary generosity and faith, frankly, in us and our vision, and it put our board's feet to the fire. So all conspired for the good here. So the story takes place shortly after he has made this intention to us known. And it's Easter Sunday, the high point of our liturgical calendar. He drives that hour to be with us, and he is sitting near the front with my husband and me. The chapel is bursting at the seams, standing room only, exquisite flowers, music, awesome, joyful homily, just beautiful in every way. And Tom is quietly weeping next to me for the entire liturgy. And I know how private he is, how unassuming. I don't draw attention to the fact that I am aware of this. No one else seems to notice, but I am so struck that for the entire joyful liturgy, Tom is weeping. At the end of Mass, we are making our way out, and I turn to Tom and I say, thank you for choosing this sacred day and this sacred space to be with us for the celebration of the Easter Eucharist. You bless us with your presence. And Tom says to me, I probably shouldn't confess this to you, Kerry, but this is my first Mass in over 40 years. And in that moment, I knew that if we did not raise $15,000 in the entire campaign, at least because of the way we were comporting ourselves, we reconciled this man with his God and with his faith community. I long since left that role, but I stayed in very close friendship with Tom and with so many others. And when he died, Father Bob was the celebrant and I was the eulogist. And he really did change the face of Catholic life at Yale. The final thing I will say is the absolutely essential nature of joy. Part of the reason those 80% of donors never responded to the appeal, the annual appeal, was that it was so lacking in joy. It was laden in guilt and kind of entitlement. Like, we know you're wealthy, give to us. What are you doing with it wasn't quite that crass, but it was not joyful. It was not joyful. And I don't think people want to give to somebody who isn't really joyful. And aren't we called to be joyful as people of faith? This was such an important ingredient, both in our commitment to be people of faith and in the way we comported ourselves in the campaign. And I remember one night, it was the eve of a board meeting, and the board at this point, the stakes had gotten so big. It was no longer this $5 million goal. They had radically increased the goal and hired this amazing architect, and just everything was increasing. And they were tired of me telling the board about all of the programmatic activities we had introduced and all the students who were coming every day of the week. And they only wanted to hear me talk about how much we had raised since the board last met. And I was almost constitutionally incapable of doing that because 95% of my job was about all these other components that gave rise to this being a place of profoundly worthy of generosity. But this is what my board wanted me to do, and I had no real big news in terms of new dollars to report. And I was praying, looking at this beautiful crucifix in my home office the night before the board meeting, late on a Friday night. I never, ever prayed for money. I always prayed for things like, let me have the words to convey hope to my board. Let me have the elan to keep everybody enthusiastic. Let me be an instrument of grace in this encounter. And these were kind of the prayers that I was saying, like, help me hold it together with the board and not let them abandon faith in this. When the phone rang, and it was a Yale Catholic alum in his 80s calling from Seattle, Kerry, so surprised to get you this late. My wife and I have been speaking all night about the extraordinary programmatic advances on Yale's campus. We are so inspired by what is happening programmatically, all the diversity of programs, sacramentally, pastorally, socially, intellectually. This is a dream come true for us. We'd like to give you $1 million. And I, honest to God, said, is this God? I said, I was just praying. I can't thank you so much. Thank you. And he cut me off and he said, do not thank me. You, plural, you're making it a joy to give. We've waited all of our lives for this. He ended up becoming a $10 million donor when all was said and done. But in that moment, he called to say, I'm connecting the programmatic vitality. You are living out your mission, and I want to invest $1 million in it. He said, before we got off, you can use it however you see best. I trust you and Father Bob. Use it however you see best. And we used some of it to pay off the debt so we could have a clean book to show to other donors. So joy, very important. I'm just going to end with this. Faith, spiritual maturity, mercy, a commitment to the dignity of the human person, a zest for life and all that life has to offer, a belief in transcendence, access to hope, tenacity, humility, awe, generosity of spirit, joy. These are all hallmarks of your success in fundraising. Keep an eye on your biases about money. See donors as subjects, not objects. Understand development as a ministry to donors. Believe that generosity is humankind's birthright. Bring your faith to bear on the responsibility of fundraising. Be joyful. Be a conduit of Christ's love and light, and a reason for someone's hope each day. Be confident in the future. Invite everyone to be part of a life-giving, other-centered, faith-filled vision of all that God intends. And thank you for being an exceedingly generous audience to me today. So I'm willing to take any comments or questions. I'd love to hear if any of this resonated for you. You can comment on your obstacles, your joys, or any questions at all. Yes.
So thank you for all you've done for Morehouse. That was my parish for 4 years.
Fabulous.
I agree with you on the comment you made about guilt, and I did not contribute.
And do you now?
I have been. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for being too. As most of us, I'm sure, know, the Ivies are not a bastion of conservative Christianity. And so you're giving me hope to be this little ministry in the middle of secular world. And it can be done with joy and tenacity and vibrance and attractiveness. And so thank you.
Yes, come back to campus. You will be, if you ever need a reason if you ever need a reason for hope, come to Yale's campus during the academic year on any random Sunday to see how full, vibrant, student-led, beautiful the celebration of the Eucharist is. And they are brilliant, destined for all kinds of leadership roles. Shame on us if we are not making sure that this brilliant generation they have to be fully formed as adults with an adult, mature life of faith, steeped in all the beautiful intellectual richness of our faith and Catholic social teaching. Because no matter what their career is or vocation, it's going to impact many other people.
Shout out to St. Mary's too.
Yes.
So Kerry, how did you get over the fear that you expressed at the beginning of your talk to begin to actually ask people, deliberately say, we prayerfully discern to give them support in the street? You've come a long way from those early days of being tepid about asking.
Yeah, I think it really is it's a decrease of oneself and an increase in the mission and vision. So to try not to think of this as fundamentally about me, we had to get our house together first to have something that we knew was profoundly worthy of generosity. And then we didn't want anyone we knew or loved to miss the opportunity to be part of that. I will also say that there were some that were never going to make this their philanthropic priority, and that is entirely okay. In those instances, I felt like the morally responsible thing to do is to steer the conversation to what is their philanthropic priority, even if it had nothing to do with us, because we are all in this together. We are all in this together, and we need to be supporting each other's important ministries and apostolates. I would so much rather a huge, joyful investment of one donor to your charity or your apostolate happen because of my facilitation than leaving with a smaller kind of obligatory gift for my organization. We really are all in it together. So less ego, less thinking it's our doing, and more this is really an opportunity for God's grace. Every encounter is a sacred encounter. Some good will happen if you stick to your plan and your strategy. You show up, you listen, you're other-centered. So initially, I made a huge mistake, and I've never made that mistake since. It haunts me. I thought, but remember, I was like 29 or something. I was really young, and they were all not old, but they were they were experienced, seasoned, yes, and they were smart Yale alumni and professors. They just and so I thought, what's going to convince them is for me to come in here and start with mission. Here is how we are living out our mission. Here are the students who are participating. Here is the new life that is being breathed into this place. What they heard was Father Bob and I came on the scene and everything changed. What have you guys been doing for the last 40 years? That is, of course, not what I intended, but it's helpful to remember it's not enough to tell our message. We're responsible for how it is heard and interpreted. So when I realized that, then I started to start each meeting by saying, we're only here because of the rich legacy and tradition that we inherited, your leadership. We would not have started this campaign without your blessing. When it got very successful, and they were all now on board, but still nervous, because it was the biggest thing that really has ever happened to the place. When it was very successful, I had almost like a dark night of the soul. And I write about that in Imagining Abundance, but what got me through that, because at a certain point, I felt like Father Bob and I were the only people who had faith in this from the beginning to the end. And all of this unnecessary, gratuitous cynicism and grief that we were getting, it just felt exhausting to be the face of joyful confidence. And I was resenting that. And I had to get over that in this dark night of the soul. And the way I did that was to pray for those who I felt were really making my heart hurt, because I wanted them to be at that finish line, that ribbon cutting. I wanted them not only to be there, I wanted to make sure I wasn't there saying, I told you, that wasn't faithful. I wanted them to be there feeling properly a part of having brought this about. And that required my interior expansion of heart and forgiveness, mercy, and understanding. It was hard, but we got there, and it was a great celebration.
Can I ask you to tell one story real quick? So you talked about your inspiration for generosity as a younger child was being part of Raskov and John and Helena. And one of my favorite stories is, and I think it ties to Imagining Abundance, is your great-grandfather in that conversation he had with Al Smith in the restroom. Do you remember that? I love how you tell that story. Can you tell that story to the group, just because I think it's helpful from the spirit of how do we imagine abundance and sort of your inspiration.
Okay, I think this is the story. So my great-grandfather, John Raskob, he was the first chairman of a political party and the campaign manager for Al Smith, the first Catholic running for president of the United States. And Al Smith, I know this is not breaking news, lost the election. And he had been governor of New York, and he was despondent. And the family lore has it that he was in the men's room of the Waldorf Astoria in New York City, lamenting that he can't go back to being governor of New York. His career is over. What is he going to do? He's so sad that he lost the presidency, when out from the shadows of the men's room came the voice of his friend, John Raskob, who said, "Al, do not despair. I have a new idea. I am going to build and finance the world's tallest building, and you are going to be the president of that enterprise." So a few days go by, he calls a press conference, he announces this ridiculous idea that he is going to build and finance the world's tallest building, and Al Smith is going to be the president of that corporation. And then the market collapses. It's 1929. No one expects John Raskob to stick to that vision. It's the end of the world. That would be complete lunacy. But John Raskob and many leaders that I really admire and respect, they don't make decisions rashly or about next week. They're looking down the line, like they're doing the hard work now, rooted in values and vision, and looking out a 50-year horizon. That's how he made that decision. So he said, to the contrary, I'm just going to use the drama of the moment to try to employ as many people around the clock as possible. They ended up building the world's tallest building, breaking every record, employing thousands and thousands of all men at the time. And that building is the Empire State Building. And it took a full 40 years before that building reached full occupancy, again, as a consequence of the market collapsing, et cetera. But now think about how many people around the world know about that iconic building. It was the sale of that building, by the way, that led, that contributed to the funds to start the Raskob Foundation for Catholic Activities. So there's a strong Catholic connection to that building. Is that the story?
Yeah, and so sometimes the voice of God comes over the phone, and sometimes it comes from the men's room stall.
Rarely, but sometimes.
You ever heard that?